Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. It is always a privilege and a pleasure to be with you each week, talking about conversations and having conversations about issues that are relevant to our community, that are relevant to the needs of our community. And with the Nora Speaks podcast, it is my goal, one of my goals, to change the narrative and change the tone of the conversations that we are having together and that we are having with other people. And in this episode, I want to talk about understanding what a revolution is. And we are once again in the midst of trying to get justice for another Black man that was shot dead. And we are also seeking to get understanding and justice regarding a sister who was killed in her home. And even if I gave you and mentioned the names of these of our people who are the latest who were killed, had their lives taken far too soon in violent and brutal ways, even if I shared their names in this episode and you're listening to this in 2020, well, if you listen to this in 2023, we will likely and unfortunately be having the same conversation, but inserting new names. And that's why it's so important that I believe that we talk about what a revolution is. And for us to see change, for us to expect change, I believe that we are looking for change to come from the wrong direction. There are many people who, and I too, we just want justice. You know, we just want fairness. We just want an end to the brutality that happens among our people, that happens to our people by others. And we want to be respected. We want to have our humanity recognized. And you know, there's two incidents that have captured national attention after much dismissal of these cases, and these family members really had to put in a lot of work to get national attention to these issues. But there's so many others. You know, I just read about a young Black man who was test driving a new car, and a Caucasian man shot at him. Just, I don't know if he was trying to kill him or trying to scare him, but he shot into the driver's side of the vehicle. Unfortunately, the young man was physically uninjured. But in such a time as this, where we are witnessing just vigilante justice or indiscriminate attempts to snuff out the life of Black people, when we're watching Black people continue to be over-policed, to be harassed, you know, we have to really think about what changes, one, do we want? What is the change that we want? And then two, where is the change going to come from? So I want to talk in this conversation about understanding what a revolution is. And I hope at the end of this conversation, then we will know that a revolution isn't defined by our passion, by what we're feeling. But a revolution is measured by the actions that we take to create the change. And I think this conversation is another important one to have, because for 150 years or so, we, Black people, have had leadership that largely were leaders who petitioned the governing powers, the legislators, to craft or amend legislation so that we could be treated with civil rights or equal rights as the white citizens in this country. And that is a good thing to have a citizen's rights observed. But before we can talk about citizens' rights, we have to talk about the human rights that have been denied to us. And these leaders who we can think about them in a historical context, and there are leaders now in a modern day context that are still seeking some kind of civil rights movement where we are acknowledged and respected and treated with civility. And I would submit in this conversation that our activism has not changed. We have continued to demonstrate in the same way, and we are still, a decade later, still suffering so many of these injustices. So, as I said, a revolution isn't defined by the feelings that we have, and we have a lot of strong feelings that we are entitled to. We are angry. We are frustrated. We are saddened by the loss of life. We have grief, with the loss of life. There are parents who no longer can hug and kiss their children because of the reckless or cruel and indiscriminate hatred or hateful behavior of others. And parents lose their children to unfortunate accidents, and parents lose their children to terrible diseases. But to think that someone just arbitrarily took it upon them to end their life and to snatch that person away, that is just so cruel. But this has been an experience that has defined our history in this country. So although we have these very strong feelings of grief, of anger, of frustration, I think it's important that we really think about what a revolution is, because we need a revolution. And so when we are just thinking about definition and understanding that the definition of these words, at the root of the word revolution, we can find the word revolt. And to revolt is rising up against governance, or rising up against established authority or control. And even at the root of both of those words, revolution and revolt, we come to the word revolve, which means to roll back, which means to withdraw. And in this case, I suggest that we as Black people need to withdraw our support of systems and governance and leaders who do not recognize our humanity, who do not who are in the position of power, but do not act in any way to acknowledge or give us justice. These leaders who stand in front of us, whether they are picked for us, or leaders who stand up, but they themselves are uneducated, they are incompetent. They stand up in front of the people because they want to be recognized as the leader, but their leadership hasn't taken the people anywhere, not only anywhere differently in a physical space, but nowhere differently in a mental space. So let's understand that a revolution is defined by actions, by the actions that we take. And, in some circles, I know that, when we're frustrated and we're angry, we think about retaliation and retaliatory justice. And we may think that a revolution should be won by using arms. And to that, I would submit that although we should always defend ourselves if we are attacked physically, we fight with those who fight against us. But I believe that we should be a peaceful people. Now, I am not saying that we should be those people who protest peacefully and turn the cheek so that someone can hit me in the other cheek. I do not believe in that. And that's why I do not believe in marching. I don't believe in these public demonstrations because there's so much violence that happens to us in these demonstrations and being in these crowds and having implants in these crowds and agitators in these crowds that can in some ways incite violence. So I don't think that those kinds of protests, although many people engage in those, but just for safety's sake, I think that that can be a very, very unsafe way to seek justice. We've known of cases where men and women were brutalized and at worst killed during a peaceful demonstration because there were agitators there or because those who were there to control the crowd, they themselves found themselves to be out of control, and but because they're in law enforcement or may have a badge or a gun, then they don't meet with the same kind of consequence that we would when we hurt or maim or take a life. So I don't think that justice is us demonstrating or marching in the streets. Now, so then what do you think can bring about justice? What do you think can bring about a revolution? You may be asking me. And it is, again, the actions that we take. The guns and people marching, us black people marching with guns, we see that even if we are registered to carry or if we are registered to own or have a gun in our homes, justice doesn't look the same for us. That was demonstrated by the killing of Philando Castile, who told an officer that he had a gun and he had a license to carry it. And that man lost his life committing no crime. So if we were to be those who were marching and demonstrating and going to the local capital, your state capital with guns, and you were to get into a fight and you were shot, or those who were demonstrating with you were shot, well, then we have to go to the hospitals that we already say we're not being treated medically fairly. And then once we run out of bullets, do we think that we're going to get more? Do we think that we're going to be supplied with ammunition so that we can fight our way to justice? That's just not going to happen. That is, I don't think that's the wise route to take to get justice. And we don't need to have a vigilante justice or vigilantism in our seek of justice. We have to control and change our own behavior. We are looking for it to come from the wrong direction. This is something that we can give to ourselves by the change in our own behaviors and the change in our own actions. I think where we may get confused or where we get it wrong is we appear to be revolting against a system. We revolt against people. We revolt against an authority figure. But instead of revolting against someone, we should be revolting for ourselves. And if we have the focus on ourselves, then we'll think about what is it that we need? What do we need in terms of education? What do we need in terms of an economic base? What do we need in terms of housing? What do we need in terms of safety in our communities? And so when we have the focus on ourselves, then the burden is on us to produce to meet those needs. In this modern day civil rights movement that is patterned after historical civil rights movement, we have always placed the burden on those who are in power. Well, by putting the burden on those who are in power through politics and government and law enforcement, then we, in some ways, abdicate our own responsibility to doing for ourselves what we want them to do for us, for recognizing our humanity, our own right to civil rights and entitlements. We put that burden on them, and we should be putting that burden on ourselves. So be very careful, those who assume positions of leadership, when you're using the word revolution. Revolution means that there is a change. Maybe you are demonstrating, maybe you are a protester, but a revolutionary produces a change, first in the thinking of people and then in the behavior of people. Now, we cannot create a revolution and change how Caucasian people think about us, right? Don't you tell your children on the playground that if Johnny doesn't want to play with you, you can't make him like you. So we have to think about what our revolution means in terms of us changing our own behaviors. We have tried for the 400 plus years that we have had experience in this country to impact the way that others think about us. And 400 years later, we are still demonstrating for acknowledgement of our humanity. So I suggest that our energies are going in the wrong direction. Our attention is going in the wrong direction. The attention and the energy should be put on us and what we can and should do for ourselves. So we should be producing safety in our communities. We should be producing economics and an economic base in our community, not using each other for economic opportunities. I don't want to support your home-based business so that you can, and you can do what you want, but so that you can go and buy Gucci and funnel those dollars that I work hard for because I want to support Black business. And now those dollars are going out of our community because we get the money because we see each other's economic opportunities. And then we go and give those hard-earned dollars to someone else outside of our community. That's unwise. That's not revolutionary. So economically, we need a revolution. Educationally, we need a revolution. We're talking about how we are being unfairly treated in medical establishments. Then we need to invest in our children's education and push them towards medicine. Then we need doctors and nurses, and we need those who can provide all manner of medical care for us, right? So we need a revolution in education. We need a revolution in our food supply, in our water supply. Our attention and our focus is in the wrong place. And because it's been in the wrong place, because we have leaders who themselves, I have to say it, they're blind, deaf, and dumb themselves, then we are continuing to have the same fight. Could you imagine being in a family and two cousins have the same fight at 60 that they had when they were 6 years old? You haven't resolved that fight yet? This is us in this country. So for 400 years, we have been fighting for justice, or at least the 100 plus after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and proclaimed that we were emancipated. So as we have been having protests and marches and demonstrations for 100 plus years, here we are in 2020 having those same marches, having those same protests, having those same rights violated. So we are in need of a revolution. It is not an armed revolution. It is an intelligent revolution. Is it a revolution in our behaviors, in our actions, in our thinkings, so that we can produce freedom, justice, and equality for ourselves? We make ourselves look small when we are continuing petitioning others for justice for us, and they have not brought this to us in the 400 years that we've experienced this. And I've heard some say, man, how much more can we take of this? How much longer? Why can't we get together and do something about this? Well, who said that we can't? It's the fact that we won't. because we want to find our comfort given to us by somebody else. When we can comfort our own selves, we can create safe spaces, safe communities, adequate educational facilities, medical facilities. We can create this for ourselves, but we have lost the ambition to do for self. So we want everything to come from somebody else. That is not a revolution. You just want an amendment. And an amendment hasn't brought us justice. So instead of looking for amended legislature, amended bills, acknowledgement of civil rights when our human rights have not been acknowledged in 400 plus years, I suggest that we do something different. We think a different way. We look to see what have others done who have not been given justice. Do they keep going to others to give it to them, or do they do something for themselves? I know some who listen to this podcast may have some foundation in religion or foundation in Christianity, right? So when you think about Moses going to Pharaoh, he didn't say, Pharaoh, could you treat my people better? Pharaoh, could you give my people civil rights? Pharaoh, could you let my people vote? Could you give my people jobs, Pharaoh? No, Moses said, let my people go, because they wanted to be free and they wanted to be self-determining. And that is what we should be seeking for ourselves. We are wasting time having the same conversations, having the same loss, the same anger, the same resentment, when we can look inward and recognize in our own community, we have those people that we need to educate us, to treat us medically, to cultivate land so that we can grow our own foods. We have those people within us, but do we have the will to produce the revolution that we need to make the change that is required? And that is the question that we have to face today. So be careful talking about a revolution when you only want a demonstration, because those are two different things with two different results. I suggest we have a revolution. I want to know what you think about this subject. I'm very interested because I hear people say, when are we going to get tired of this? And I wonder, do they think, are they ever going to get tired of this? The comments that they put on social media about us and about what they think about us. And I'm not making a blanket statement. I'm talking about those people who are putting comments on social media and those people who are taking their guns and snuffing out the lives of Black bodies, of our future. They're showing us what they think about us. And I don't have time to sort through to determine who likes us more than the other. I have to put my energy into petitioning my people, because my people are the people that I know I need to interact with to get the changes that really will give us freedom, justice, and equality. So think about what you want. Think about if we're going to continue another 100 years having the same conversations, having 6-year-old arguments at 60 years old, having 7-year-old arguments at 70 years old, having 200-year-old arguments, having 300-year-old arguments in this country. When are we going to mature to produce something different? We have to understand what a revolution is. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Stay tuned next week for another episode that will be coming at you. I look forward to speaking with you then. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, NoraMuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.